great.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see if I'm good to go. Mic check, 1, 2, 3. All right, great, wonderful. I've always wanted to do this, like walk around on the stage freely. One of my bucket lists this year is do a TED Talk. I think I've got the keynote speech ready for that TED Talk. I know that I have the content, and the one thing that I always figured out is how does it feel to walk on stage as if I'm in a TED Talk? So today I'm going to be practicing as I'm delivering this presentation. All right, good morning. And
Morning, everyone.
it's 8:30 in the morning, and I appreciate you guys spending your morning hours with us here. I know we're in the life sciences track. Today we're going to be going over building a multilingual statistical computing environment around SAS Viya. All right, I'm going to set the stage for what we're going to cover today. I'm going to talk a little bit about our vision, because it is very important to understand the context, the why, and then leading to the what. And then our story is essentially the how we did that. And we're going to talk a little bit about the execution commitment that we have embodied throughout this journey. We're going to cover how strategy goes into tactics, and that goes into the execution, and how continuous learning throughout that process is essentially key to survive through that. We will talk about the challenges faced, because obviously this was no walk in the park. We always knew that. So we acknowledged that, we learned that early, and we made a commitment to accommodate for any challenges along the way, and we wanted to make sure that we accomplished the task at hand. And when you do something like that, you gain a little bit of knowledge along the way. We're going to talk to you about the wisdom that we've gained in our journey, therefore helping you in yours, or considering, I know many people here are probably considering SAS Viya as a platform. Everybody has to be considering statistical computing environment as an item in order for you guys to do all the things that you as an IT organization or you as the business, in order to analyze that data, this most sensitive, precious data, in order to advance clinical trials. And then I'm going to finish in a classic style by the numbers. I was on stage at SAS Innovate last year, Regeneron, representing Regeneron. We had a long conversation with many people in SAS in 2024. This journey really started out 3 years ago, and I'll go through some of the specifics of that. But the point is that we've come a long way in 3 years, and we're right now at a stage where we can actually show some numbers and tell the audience that story without just making forward-looking statements, right? All right. What is our vision? Accelerate data to insight. That's it. It's as simple as that, and as powerful as that. We had a vision for making the modern analytical ecosystem. We wanted to make sure that it attends to the 5 pillars, or principles, as you would say. Yesterday I was at the panel discussion, and somebody asked me about governance, and I said, well, governance is it starts from the values that you have, and then from the values comes policies, and from the policies comes how you get that done, and so that's that framework. In the same way, this modern analytical ecosystem did not just come about as things stitched together, and as an afterthought, us adding one more thing, and then one more thing, and then, evolving. We did not do it that way. We intentionally set out to achieve these 5 principles. What are they? Connectivity to data sources. What good is your analytical system if you can't connect to the data from where it's at? And that, as simple as that sounds, that's just an ODBC adapter. No. It's getting the data from the point of acquisition to the point of integration and to the point of consumption seamlessly, making sure that it's of integrity, nothing got lost along the way, and at the same time, only the right people got access to the right data. the connectivity and the governance and all that, it's the most important thing. You need to be able to be connected to your data. It's the oil that you're going to fuel your machine. Next, scalability and elasticity. Gone are those days where we had small data sets, 5 MB, 10 MB, and so on and so forth in a clinical trial. These days, we have IoTs, sensors, biomarker data, PK data. You name it, the data is voluminous. The data is complex. You have to be able to scale with a level of elasticity, and you need to be able to do that on the fly. And scalability and elasticity, not just from a storage perspective, but also compute and the number of users in the platform as well. So we need to make sure that these things are getting accounted for right in the get-go. Next, best-in-breed tools. We knew that we're not going to get the one ring that rules them all. We knew it. SAS has been around for 35 years or more.
50.
50.
I
Thank you.
picked the button.
I'm glad you guys are awake. So SAS has been around for 50 years, and it has been the monolithic platform. I'm standing the stage of SAS, embracing SAS, but also acknowledging the fact that there are other analytical systems, tools, toolkits, integrations points, and so on and so forth. So what we needed to have is the best in-breed tools. SAS is certainly a part of that equation. SAS Viya, specifically, for all that it brings. But we need to have the best in breed ecosystem. We cannot walk in thinking that it's going to be a one tool, one ring, rule them all. And then the cohesive user experience, which is really, frankly, like I should have put that right in the center, because ultimately, when I was a SAS programmer, I used to secretly curse the IT department who put that system together. Either because it was too slow, either because it would not scale, either because my experience when I go into that area, and then I want to take some data and analyze it using another tool, I had to go into one environment, authenticate myself, do something, and almost break the rules to access that data through another tool by copying, because the other tool won't be here, and then this won't talk to that, and that won't talk to this. Nightmare. I was sharing with Mark yesterday about a previous iteration of SAS and other tools that over the years we have used, tried, and there were limitations. Matter of fact, this entire cloud-based, like SAS Studio style things were part of SAS's roadmap 20 years ago. It was slow. It was hard. If you were in Europe and trying to access this thing which was deployed in the US, it was worse. So that's the point. The point is that ultimately, we have to look at the user experience, because if you don't get that user waking up in the morning, bright and early, take their morning Joe, and come to your platform to do 8 hours of work, and they're not happy to do 8 hours of work in your platform, you've lost the battle then and there. Lastly, but not the least, governance. I think I talked about a little bit about governance before, and I talked about my response to the question for governance in the panel discussion yesterday. The single most important item of all, governance. You need to be, what we deal with is not stock price data over the period of time and so on and so forth. Yes, that's good, that's important, but it's not data coming from a patient who voluntarily is donating a pint of their blood so that future clinical research and future patients can benefit out of that. That data, that commitment, that is what we work with every day. Therefore, the governance of that is sacred, and we have to make sure that governance is baked in as part of the ecosystem and not as an afterthought. All right, so what did we achieve? Part of our vision is to then go from the principles to how are we going to do that? This is a conceptual architecture, And I made it extremely simple without fancy logos and so on and so forth. Not because we did not have the time and we were doing this last minute and I was out on spring break with my kids and presentation submission deadline was due and just had to put something together overnight. Not because of that, but because of the fact that I wanted to keep it simple. No distractions, no fancy pictures, no Big Four type of view wherein you look at it and you say, oh, that's the same story that I've seen from this company and this company and this company and this company and this company, right? I wanted to make it simple for a reason. Here, let me explain that. Out to your left is the source data layers, right? Your data sources, your EDCs, your non-EDCs, and your RWDs. Coming into, that's external, in that little green box, which is our Regeneron Virtual Private Cloud. AWS is probably in the room. We've done some great partnership with them, and we are doing great stuff with their cloud. So in that cloud, which is Regeneron's cloud, protected, secure, we have the data engineering pipelines, which essentially give you, from the point of acquisition for your data, to bring that in, your raw data, your common clinical data model, your modeled data, so that you can quote-unquote bootstrap analyses. And that is then served as an item, as a source, to your unified analytical platform. That little, I don't know what you call it, a button or a little tile, is what our talk is about today. That's our journey that we're double-clicking on, even though there's journeys to the left, journeys to the right, and so on and so forth, that we've done here that we're very proud of. The unified analytical platform really consists of a few major items. We need to have the best-in-breed tools. We knew that, so we chose SAS Viya, the trusted partner for 35 to 50 years, and Posit, the new entrant into the industry, promising, young buck, making sure that AI, ML, models, and so on and so forth, cutting edge, like people from college are so proficient in R and Python, and data scientists love that aspect of it. And great, so let's have the best-in-breed tools. Let's not make this about SAS versus R or SAS versus Posit, so on and so forth. Let's give the best-in-breed to the community. Let's democratize that. Once again, going back to our principle, right? And then a common shared storage. This is my personal gripe when I was a programmer. I used to use SAS, and then I used to hop on and then used to use some of the tool and so on and so forth, and I need to move things from one place to another place to another place to another place. I'm copying the same data multiple times. It's governance nightmare, and it's kind of breaking the rules as well. But we were forced to. No longer. We set out by doing a common shared storage. We picked the right storage for the job at hand. We made sure that SAS Viya, as a tool, which has a recommendation on what storages can support that, we took the recommendation, we matched it up against what we can do in a multi-tool ecosystem. We then went back to SAS and we said, hey SAS, we would want to do something else other than your recommendation. Let's work together and figure this out. Because it's a little bit bigger than just SAS Viya. We're trying to use this for other things. And SAS, as great partners, went along with the journey and helped us achieve this common shared storage on top of which SAS Viya, Posit, and in the future, Databricks, and in the future, something else that we don't know yet about, is all going to sit on top of. That means I have one place to go to my access management, governance, policy enforcement, and it's the same person. If you have access to this particular file in this particular folder, you can open that through SAS, you can open that through Posit, you can open that through Databricks, you can open that to the next tool that we'll put in the ecosystem. The idea was simple, but the impact, huge. Next, governance, UI, access management, and audit trails and admin. That little tile Statistical computing environment. Fuse put out that white paper, I think it was 2019, if I'm not mistaken. It became de facto gold standard in the industry as to how a statistical computing environment needs to be. We took that and we said, wow, this looks great. How cool would it be to make one better? We set out on that journey, 2022, thinking about what is that paper trying to say? Not that what that paper is saying, but where is the spirit of that paper? Where is it trying to go? Let's catch that. Let's make sure that we do that. Fundamentally, we knew that we needed something that is secure, scalable, and performant and all that stuff, but we also needed to have a very simplistic access management, a methodology to do audit trails, the question of who accessed this data set, which then drives the primary efficacy endpoint, and FDA is doing a review, and they're wondering sort of how that data was put together and whether that data was put together in the right way. So they come in for an audit, and they're asking a simple question. Who had access to this data set? At what point? When did they make it? Were the changes happening? What were the specifications of this data set? And how did it change over time? And prove it to me that it was validated and so on and so forth by your SOPs. It's just a very simple question. And I had this question being asked at a war room when the FDA came by. But the answer to that can be extremely difficult if your systems are fragmented, if your data is all over the place, if you're in a siloed way of working, and you can't establish the why, when, what, where, how behind that particular data. That stops now. What we did is we said, we're not going to make that an afterthought. We are going to bake that as part of the pie. We put that governance, we have all the audit trails, all the necessary information, all the access management. There's folks here who take access management so seriously that anytime I say access management, his name pops up in my head, Richard. So it's not a trivial thing. It's not. It's one of the most important things in the analytical platform for the data that we govern and for the things that we do with that data. What we wanted to do is, even though that's there in sort of a bare bones way, and we sort of siphon all this audit trail information from the storage layer, we siphon it from the tools, we siphon it from the environment, the infra layer, and so on and so forth. We put everything on Splunk, and we sort of sift it, and so on and so forth, and we get there. We can answer that question today. Who, why, when, where, what, on anything that any of our programmers or data scientists do in our environment. It's GCP requirements, and we can do that now. But we don't want to stop there. We want to take it one step further. We want to take the possibilities that are enabled by AI. We want to be able to ask this question for an audit or an auditor in natural language and have it understand semantically the mountain of data that our platform is spitting out as a log on the back end, have that AI semantic layer in place so that questions such as that and others can be asked in plain, simple, natural language, and it can be returned back to them in a very beautiful wrapped UI. We have our implementation partner in the room who's supported us in our journey, where we brainstorm about this. How do we do it? How should it look like? It should not be complicated, but it should be complex. It should carry all the weight, but it should be simple. So those principles, once again, user experience, is driving the build that we're doing on this rig. And lastly, the AI integration layer, the reason why it sits a little bit outside of the SCE is because, ultimately, AI is an enabler for everything that we do from left to right. Even that data acquisition piece is something that we're going to bootstrap with AI, and we're going to be doing a little bit of AI bootstrapping for our, for example, common clinical data model, the transformations and SDTMs and so on and so forth. All of that requires AI, and the analytical platform will greatly be bootstrapped by AI. So things like SAS Copilot or Positron's connectivity to LLMs and so on and so forth, we want to take an approach that is, once again, tool agnostic. We wanted to have our own AI integration layer, our own LLMs, and our own bedrock on the background, solving for all of our use cases, conversing with the best of breed tools, and having integration points through a common protocol, thank you, MCP, so that we can talk that language of LLMs talking to tools, tools talking to LLMs, in a fluent way, as if two people are having conversation in the hallway. The architecture behind that is going to be complex to make sure that this happens across the ecosystem, et cetera. However, the principle behind that is dumb simple. Going right back to first principles thinking. How should it look like? It should be a conversation between the LLMs and the tools. Great. How are they going to converse? Well, through common protocols like MCP. How is that transaction going to happen? It's going to happen in a secure manner without leaking our data on either side, either the tool side or the LLM side. All right? And how should the user experience be? The user should not even know the complexity of the background that enables this. They should just walk in, come to their tool of choice, which is SAS Viya or Posit or Databricks or anything else, and be able to just pop open a chat window which understands natively the context of the session that you're working on, allows you to ask questions and retrieve answers for the things that only you have access for. Once again, that goes back to the common shared storage and how we meticulously control access. And that is then surfaced in your best-of-breed tools as outputs, as logs, as recommendation, and so on and so forth. All the while, your data never moved away from your ecosystem because we got AWS Bedrock protecting that. Simple. It's going to be a bit challenging to make that happen, but we're going to get that done. All right. I'm going to rush through this so that I can have Anand speak through a little bit of double clicks in the other ones, and I want to come back and finish strong. We knew that we need, so how do we do this? Our execution commitment, right? Okay. I want to take the 15 seconds right now. Strategy drives execution. Strategy drives execution. If there's one thing that I want you to walk away with today, keep saying that, keep repeating that. Have your values, have your principles. Think about it from a first principles design mindset. And then go into your execution. If any hour that you skip on the strategy layer, you will pay for it 10 times over on the execution layer. Be thoughtful, be mindful. And what we need to achieve here, because the end goal is something that is, it's extremely important, right? So be mindful. Okay, so how do we do that? What was that strategy? We knew that we needed stakeholder commitment, because I've been part of this and I've heard stories. IT went ahead and wanted to modernize our ecosystem, and so they went ahead and did what they needed to do, and they put all these plans together, they have a roadmap, and now they're going to deliver. And halfway into that journey, the business leader comes and says, well, did you guys come and ask me about what I feel about this? It happens all the time. Different parts of the organization moving at different speeds and in different sort of silos, et cetera, and they're not in sync. We knew that if we were to do this journey, if we were to take 400 plus programmers off of the SAS 9.4 ecosystem to SAS Viya and take them out of EG and put them on SAS Studio, we knew that we needed the commitment of the stakeholder. Our statistical programming leadership, our pharmacometric leadership in the room today, were partners since the beginning of this journey. They knew exactly what we were trying to do, and they liked it, they were embracing it. They had questions, they had concerns. But we were able to address those concerns, address those questions, and spend the time in the beginning in order to make sure that we have the stakeholder commitment. And more so, we knew that stakeholder commitment is not just a one single point in time thing, that it's going to be an evolving item, because there's going to be problems, there's going to be pitfalls. Are you still going to stand by us and our decision, collective decision, that we're going to make this journey? And the answer was yes, we value this journey, let's go. So we're here with that. Rigorous planning. Anand will talk about a little bit of the double click in planning and so on and so forth, but we're blessed. Regeneron's blessed to work with the brightest minds, and some of the planning done by Anand and his team, akin to no other that I've seen in the industry. Meticulous planning, Gantt charts, looking at what the possible risks are and where the pitfalls might be, mitigation strategies for that, engaging the users earlier, taking something, the next one, test small, and then scale big. Taking it in a dev approach, taking a workload, sample workload from PK, sample workload from stat programming, bringing it into the ecosystem in dev, working with SMEs, and making sure that the platform is going to support when you actually deploy, even before you deploy it in prod. Very important. The mindset, the planning, the rigorous planning, all done, allowed us to succeed. And then change management support. It's not easy, right? Going from EG to, I remember kicking and screaming when my leadership told me that I will have to do programming in EG, and I was very much of a vanilla SaaS, fan. Display manager, right? And I remember I was one of the leaders who were supposed to be supporting that move. But secretly myself, I knew that I was going to be very unhappy because I knew exactly, I had my tools, options, keystrokes, like macro, whatever that is. I had that whole thing set for all the keys. And the first thing that I do in an environment when I come in is set all that up. And I'm hyper productive with autofill and autocomplete and all that good stuff for the rest of my session. I didn't know where that option was in EG. I didn't know whether it was going to be there. I didn't know whether my experience was going to be different. My point is that there's a lot going on in people's minds who are trying to deliver the portfolio and do the actual job. As IT, as business, as leadership, we're here to make sure that that journey of theirs is simple, because what they're trying to do is fix the plane when they're flying the plane, and they have to get out of the plane and go on a parachute and land onto a boat and then scuba dive under the ocean and go retrieve the stretcher chest and bring it back out. That's the kind of mission that they're on. I've seen their timelines. I've been part of that story. It is meticulous. Submissions, multiple compounds. It's like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. One thing after another thing after another thing after another thing. And among all that, they need to change from a platform to another? Come on. We got to make it easy for them, right? That's change management, making sure that's already in place. And then execute, execute, execute. The idea is that we do all of this, but then you have to have the execution rigor. And luckily, you end up with folks who's going to be helping you to do that. And then adapt and refine. The agile mentality, the mindset, so that you keep moving forward. All right. I'm going to now turn the mic over to Anand, and I'll come back and finish a little bit about the numbers and so on.
Thank you, Dilip. So Dilip has wonderfully laid out the vision and the strategy, and now we face the reality. We have the strategy given to us, the vision ready. How do we execute? Execute, execute, execute. So if you ask the question, did we face challenges? Yes. Did we overcome it? Definitely. It takes a couple of iterations. So it takes a village to solve the problem, and we engaged a change management strategy where we had worked with SaaS, the business teams, IT, storage, cloud ops, and even Dell, who is the platform provider for AWS and Isilon. It takes a village to solve the problem, and we took one problem at a time and solved one problem at a time, just navigated our way forward as we did. Jeff talked about the batch submit, so that's the first one, which was the one which the team worked on. So the issue is Scripting was used, multiple logs was a requirement, and as Jeff nicely put out, X command, what if we take X command out of SASVaya? It's not going to work. So Jeff nicely explained the options, and we finally used rsubmit as a viable option. So we did try out multiple options, and we chose whatever works for the business as well as IT without basically having a stalemate on how do we move from SASGrid to SASVaya. The second one was dataset encoding, which we found a little bit later in the game, right? So we had most of the datasets in SASGrid on WLATIN1. There were some UTF-8 datasets, but primarily WLATIN1 was the dataset which was used in SASGrid. As we are getting ready for migration and testing out some dry runs, we saw like, hey, okay, everything is automatically converting to UTF-8. And we saw that the file sizes were doubling up, and we basically worked very closely with the SAS team, and we had a solution which is basically add an additional context, add a Latin-1 context in SAS Studio. That basically helped us navigate this dataset encoding issue. So natively, SASVaya uses UTF-8. We can add this additional context, Latin-1. The programmer has to make the choice and choose on the right side of the screen in SAS Studio, and enable Latin-1 context for any datasets which are primarily the old WLATIN1 in SASGrid. The third one is an interesting problem which we worked with the PK team. We have folks from the PK team and the leadership also here. So there were a use case where PK team was using ProcIML within SAS programs, generating an image, a PNG file, converting the PNG file to an RTF, and eventually converting that to a PDF for CSR submission, so the figures, essentially. And we found that the X11 libraries were incompatible with VIA. And we worked very closely with the SAS product team, as well as the customer support team. And the customer success manager basically helped us kind of navigate this entire process. We got tested with the Cairo package to make sure that the image looks pixel to pixel the same. Then we came up with a custom solution for PDF generation, which is LibreOffice, which we implemented as well. The good thing about LibreOffice is it's a Kubernetes-based architecture. It can scale well, as opposed to a traditional, I convert my file, put a PNG into an RTF file, and then use a word engine to convert using DCOM libraries to basically use a PDF conversion. This is a seamless and a scalable process which we implemented. Third one is a very important topic. We spent a lot of time on this with the business. So change management is a very critical aspect of your program. We have folks, programmers who have been working on EG for 10 plus years, and all of a sudden you are talking about a browser-based user interface. It requires a bit of back and forth discussion on what are the best options we have. We chose the cloud-based architecture for a reason, for scalability, because we wanted to scale and basically enable this to a multilingual open source computing with the ability to go the AI route in future. And Enterprise Guide was a tool which we had multiple sessions with SAS learning team. We had workshops, roadshows, essentially to show the differences between what you can do in EG versus what you can do in SAS Studio, and how we can make the transition. And part of the batch submit was also a part of that, which we did on the transition part. There was a peculiar use case which is very important from a business perspective, that each of the macros need to be logged by a program, not just a single log line limit. And we came across a 10,000 line log line limit, which SASVaya had. Again, we worked with the product team, and we made it as part of the LT 2025-09. We did extensive testing, including the SAS product team, business, and now I believe the limit is about 100,000 lines. And this is another important change which we implemented. The last one is a very important one. We are basically building an architecture which is primarily built on a standard storage. The vision, as Dilip highlighted, is to have a single storage platform which works on a SSD configuration, which means that I can use the file either using a Linux user interface or a Windows user interface, democratize the access of the storage system to the programmer. And that storage system should essentially work with multiple platforms, SASVIA being one, and POSIT was the other platform which we are building, which also used the same storage platform. Earlier, what used to happen is a programmer typically has a file in a certain set of storage platform for SASVIA use, copy over the same data sets and files to another platform for RStudio. We wanted to eliminate that, harmonize the process. One file, any system, multilingual, democratize this entire process. And one key area which we discussed and basically had an issue was Grid was using NFS v3, and it was based on a on-prem Isilon storage. And we were migrating to an AWS-based Dell Isilon storage. And there were some challenges in the way SASVIA POSIX permissions were not read by Isilon. There was some back and forth issues where there were certain files where the read write modify was not honored. So we had to work with our storage team as well as get support from Dell, who manages the Dell Isilon. And SAS team spent a lot of time with us to try and test this out, providing scripts and doing all the standard things. Eventually, we figured out how to do this, and we spent a lot of time with the business testing this out. And this is a very critical aspect of the integration because the entire platform is based on Isilon. And we would like to thank our implementation partner, SAS Customer Success, and tech support for, you see, multiple iterations and multiple product updates were made as we did this. We're extremely thankful for SAS and our implementation partner for this support. With that, I'm going to talk a little bit about, change gears and talk a little bit about validation. We can have all the grand vision strategy, but end of day, it's validation, right? We are talking about an on-prem SaaS Grid system, which has a local storage, and moving the entire thing to a cloud-based architecture, Kubernetes-based architecture. So how did we address this? We ensured that every single component touched by SASVIA is validated, be it databases, file stores, integrations. The moment a file comes from an external vendor, follow through the entire route of what the file transforms into, stage by stage, and make sure that every single component it touches is validated. So this requires a lot of coordination with the cloud team, the database teams, the storage teams, and of course, the SASVIA team. How did we get this right? Start with the basics. Start with the AWS components. SASVIA as an architecture has multiple pieces here. We are talking about EKS, EC2 instances, S3, Isilon. Isilon sits on top of EBS, so EBS is naturally involved. And we have very rigorous guidelines for platform within Regeneron. It's based on GMP because the architecture is similar for manufacturing systems as well as IT systems, so we had to follow a GMP-based process. Once we got the AWS components and storage components set up, one key piece of advice, I know each organization has a different way of validating. Don't ignore this part. You don't want this part to be impediment after you start implementing your SASVIA, so start early. Start looking at the infrastructure first, then start thinking about SASVIA. It takes time, and if you're going GMP, think about even 2 months, 3 months of implementation. And once we got the AWS components and storage validated, then came the SASVIA components. And the way we approached this is first we did a non-GXP implementation, probably 3 or 4 months ahead of the GXP implementation, and released it to non-GXP use cases like health epidemiology, health economic outcomes and epidemiology. They had some use cases for non-GXP. Then in parallel, we started building out the GXP infrastructure. So we gave some time for the AWS and storage components to basically get aligned. And once we released the SASVIA GXP component, then came the ProcIML. We talked about ProcIML a couple of minutes back. We had to validate the R packages individually as well. SASVIA comes with the standard IQOQ which SAS gives, and we basically tweak that to meet our organization requirements. In addition, the R packages which are used by ProcIML have to be validated. Philip talked about audit logging capabilities, which is basically a separate tool which works along with the Isilon for audit logging, who did what, who accessed the data set, what was the ACL permissions, and when did the ACL permissions change, those kind of things. That we are basically doing in stages depending on what we need, and that is a staged phase-based activity. There also is an additional third-party component such as LibreOffice. These are evolving requirements, and basically this is like a BAU kind of an activity. So there could be changes which keeps coming in on a day-to-day basis or a monthly basis. We line them up based off our validation strategy. Next, I'll talk a little bit about migration, platform validation. How did we approach platform validation? It's basically the high risk versus the low risk. We had a scale, the system risk validation plan, the URS, and scripted and unscripted. Basically, we decided depending on which is critical versus which is not that critical. So we basically chose that approach. And we had a plan for the migration strategy as well. We had a data migration plan which defined how we are going to do the entire migration, and then we had a repeatable process for each migration. What did we gain? We know that business engagement is the key. How do we bridge a chasm? Day one continuity activities are critical. Wave-based migrations is a strategy. Champion the champions, enable the business. Product-based approach, think beyond VIA. Look at the POSIX platform. Look at whatever you want from a grand vision. Communication is critical. And then onboard the validation team. They are your partners. With that, I'll give it back to them. I know I took a lot of time.
No worries. Thank you, Anand. As you saw that, a lot of info, lots of things going into this. And in the interest of time, and maybe your morning coffee is just fizzling down, you might look at me and say, Dilip, you guys are talking about so many things, so many cool stuff, a lot of moving parts. Ain't nobody got time for that. Show me the numbers. All right, I'll show you the numbers. The number of users we have migrated into VIA since the start of our journey in March 16th, after our platform has gone live December of last year, 156 to 238 to 264, and we're on track to hit the 400 by the end of this journey. That's number of users, that's number of humans. That starts telling the story. Next, volume of data migrated from legacy to VIA. The amount of files that we moved from one spot to another. It's files and it's storage volume. So as you see, a 12 million file being our target, we're done with 5, and then we're sort of inching towards the finish line. And the same way, volume, 90 terabytes or so is what we have today in our legacy, and we're slowly getting there. All right, but these are numbers, but here, let me tell you a story. This is the story of Regeneron's unified analytical platform. We started in September 2024, kicked off strategic planning, a lot of yap. Jaren and I spent countless weeks strategizing about what is SaaS VIA, why is it important, how are we going to bring it in? And then me and the business leads strategized about, is this important to you? Are you going to be benefiting from this? Look at how cool this is. Are you in for the journey? And so on and so forth. So a lot of strategy happened around that time when we kicked off, right before September 2024. Vegas Innovate was one of the events where we truly understood how hard SaaS parties, as well as how good SaaS takes care of its customers from a strategic standpoint. And so we did a lot of that planning in Vegas as well when we attended the SaaS Innovate there. And then we kicked off in September 2024. In August 2025, we went live with the non-GXP platform, as Anand said. It's almost a year. What were we doing? Just twiddling our thumbs? No. We were making sure that we were making the right selections for our storage, right selections for our implementation partner, thank you Accenture, and right selections for the conversations and the level of relationships we need to have when we take this journey, because we know there's going to be things happening, and we know that we need to be working together with our business, with our implementation partners, with SaaS, Deposit, and everybody, right? So once again, time invested in strategy yields you results, and that's what we did there. And then in December 2025, as you see, just in 3 months, the GXP platform goes live. February 2026, just a couple of months ago, our migration pilot, meaning let's take one study, let's move it over to Val, not to Prod yet, let's move it over to Val, and let's see, is everything working the way that we are intending it for working, right? Then in March, which is not too long ago, March 16th was that date, our first migration, we started our batches in waves. Meticulous planning, implementation partner, product owner, the entire team, communications with SaaS, the whole 9 yards, keeping business abreast, business being a very key part, and bringing in, here's my portfolio, here are my deliverables, here are my, my things that I need to do. Make your planning happen around these constraints. Great, we love a challenge, so we go ahead and do that, right? We make sure that we know what compounds to migrate when, and how many people we're migrating at each point, and so on and so forth. And then May to November 2026, we're doing a lot of other cool stuff, which is between now and the end of the year. We're getting a UI, like I said, to simplify. And we already have these objects, but we're getting a UI to simplify the access, audit management, and so on and so forth. The why, when, what, where, how question from the FDA. And we are also releasing that POSIT component within the GXP environment. We have that as a non-GXP right now, but we're releasing and launching the GXP POSIT with obviously packages underneath of it. That means that we have to validate the packages, and we're also going for the gold, as we always do. We're not only doing R and R packages, we're also doing Python and Python packages, so that we can truly enable this ecosystem wherein a programmer in SaaS Viya or in POSIT is using the underlying R packages, Python packages through SaaS or through POSIT, and all of them are validated and tested and so on and so forth. And then obviously the integration of AI and through our Guard LLMs. And then in April, well, between now and December 2026, which is the end of the year, we would be doing meticulous waves, migration of what I just showed you in the previous screen, which is we've started, we're halfway, and then we're just going to get to the finish line. What we do here is not trivial. What we do here was hard. What we do here was intentful. What we do here was thoughtful, because there was no margin for error. No margin for error. Ain't nobody got time for that. So we had to get this right the first time. So we did. And at the end of this year, Regeneron will be heading into 2027 with a modern, multilingual, modular, flexible, AI-enabled, cloud-native, elastic, scalable, secure, GXP-compliant statistical computing environment. And that's our talk. Thank you.
So we have